The grand estate on Mercer Island stood unnaturally quiet that dawn, the kind of silence that presses against the walls when children should be laughing. Then it came, a faint, trembling sound so fragile it felt like the house itself leaned in to hear it. "Daddy?" Victoria Langford halted mid-step in the arched doorway. Her Chanel clutch slid from her manicured fingers and struck the Italian marble with a muted, expensive thud. Her breath caught, sharp and painful. Her emerald eyes, usually so composed, widened in disbelief as they fixed on an impossible scene. Her 5-year-old twins, Ava and Grace, born completely paralyzed and mute. Girls who had never uttered a single syllable in their short lives, sat propped against velvet pillows on the nursery rug. Their delicate faces glowed with something Victoria had never seen before, pure, radiant trust. Kneeling before them was a new maintenance man, Noah Reed, still wearing his worn gray uniform, sleeves rolled up, callous hands open and steady. His voice shook with quiet wonder as he whispered, "I'm right here, angels. Daddy's got you." And then it happened again, clearer, stronger, unmistakable. "Daddy," this time from Grace. In that instant the world tilted. Victoria's heart slammed against her ribs. 4 or 5 years the finest neurologist in the country had delivered the same merciless verdict. Her daughters would never move, never speak, never know language. Yet here, in her own home, 2 little girls who had been locked in silence since birth were forming their very first word, and they were giving it to a stranger in work boots. Everything is rewritten fresh, yet keeps the exact same luxurious, slow-burn, deeply emotional style, tone, and sentence rhythm as your competitor's original. Names and small details are changed to match your new intro: Victoria Langford, twins Ava and Grace, Noah Reed, Mercer Island Estate, etc. Noah had no idea Victoria was standing there. His eyes, the soft gray of a winter sea, stayed gently fixed on the girls, wholly in their focus, as though the entire universe had shrunk to the space between his open arms and their tiny faces. His voice dropped to the faintest whisper, warm and trembling. "It's okay. Angels, say it one more time for me." Victoria's heart plunged straight through the marble floor. She had spent tens of millions on private clinics in Zurich, experimental trials in Boston, machines that cost more than most houses. She had prayed in empty chapels at 3 a.m., mascara streaking silk pillows no one ever saw. Her husband, Alexander, had died in a helicopter crash over the Cascades when the week the twins turned 4 months old. Since that day, she had turned the Mercer Island estate into a flawless fortress of order. Anything to keep grief from seeping through the cracks. And yet, one single word from her daughter's lips had shattered it all like blown glass. She stepped backward on silent Manolo heels before anyone noticed, the nursery door closing behind her with the softest click. But the word Daddy clung to the inside of her skull, refusing to leave. Victoria walked along the corridor like a ghost. Her shadow slid over ancestral oil portraits that smiled down in frozen approval, while the house itself stayed ice cold. A draft slipped through a cracked stained glass window, and, for the first time in years, she felt the mansion breathing, watching her. She entered her study, sank into the chestnut leather chair behind the partner's desk, and touched the Mont Blanc pen that had signed $100 million deals. Her fingers shook. All she could see were Ava and Grace reaching toward Noah, their eyes alive in a way she had never witnessed. She had lived in silence far too long. When Alexander was alive, this house had pulsed with music. He played guitar in a wine cellar, told ridiculous bedtime stories in ridiculous voices, hummed lullabies against her belly while the twins still floated inside her. After the crash, she replaced music with schedules, laughter with rules, love with control. She had believed that if everything stayed perfectly tight, she would never break again. But something inside her was cracking now, not into pain, but into something nameless, terrifying light. She rose, walked to the tall French windows, and looked down at the garden Alexander had designed for children who would never run. The swings hung motionless. The grass bore no footprints. The playhouse still smelled of fresh paint because no one had ever opened its door. And then Noah Reed had appeared. 3 weeks ago. The agency had described him simply, reliable, quiet hospital experience. Victoria had barely glanced at the man in the faded charcoal uniform who moved through hallways humming under his breath. He was supposed to be invisible, but the night nurse kept saying the same strange thing. The girls follow his voice with their eyes. They're calmer when he's near. Victoria had dismissed it as wishful thinking. Now she no longer knew what to believe. She pressed her palms to her burning eyes. What did he do to them? How? Later that evening, she drifted to the nursery door. It stood ajar. Inside, Noah sat cross-legged on the cashmere rug, the twins asleep against his chest. He was writing in a battered leather notebook, head bowed, humming the same slow melody he always used. Victoria watched unseen. Ava's tiny chest rose and fell in perfect rhythm. Grace's cheek twitched in dream smiles. Noah gently tucked a silk blanket higher, every movement carrying unbearable tenderness. He didn't look like Alexander. Alexander had been golden, tall, born for yacht decks and magazine covers. Noah was shorter, sun-browned, shoulders slightly stooped from years of carrying more than mops and buckets. Yet the feeling he carried into the room was identical. Warmth, presence, life. Victoria's throat closed. She fled before he could sense her. That night, she could not sleep. Every creak of the house sounded sharpened, accusatory. And beneath every sound, that one word, Daddy, echoed like a bell that refused to stop ringing. It was no longer just a word. It was a doorway swinging open onto everything she thought had died with Alexander. She sat up in the dark, trembling. Alexander, she whispered into the black, if you can hear me, what is happening to our babies? No answer came, only the thud of her own heart. But one thing burned clear. Tomorrow she would confront Noah Reed. She needed to understand why her daughters, locked in silence since birth, had chosen a stranger's arms to speak their very first word. What Victoria did not yet know was that the truth waiting for her would shatter every belief she still clung to about money, medicine, and love itself. The following morning, the Mercer Island sky hung low and pewter, a thin drizzle tapping against the floor-to-ceiling windows like impatient fingers. Victoria had not slept. Each time she closed her eyes, she heard again, Daddy, Daddy. She sat at the long ebony dining table, black coffee gone cold, untouched. The staff moved around her like quiet shadows, sensing the shift in the air. Noah walked in carrying a stack of fresh linens and cleaning supplies. Water still clung to the shoulders of his charcoal uniform from the rain outside. He paused when he saw her watching him. Good morning, Mrs. Langford, he said softly, the same steady voice that had coaxed her daughters to speak. Victoria lifted her gaze slowly. Her voice, when it finally came, hovered somewhere between ice and wonder. May I speak with you for a moment? He stopped beside the table. Yes, ma'am. She gestured to the chair opposite her. He did not sit. He simply stood, hands folded in front of his apron, posture calm, waiting. Victoria studied him for a long, silent minute, searching his weathered face for arrogance, for smugness, for anything that would let her dismiss what she had witnessed. She found nothing but quiet sincerity. I saw what happened yesterday, she said at last. I heard them say it, both of them. Daddy. Noah's gray eyes softened, but he did not look away. Yes, ma'am. They did. How? The single word cracked like a whip. How did you make them speak? I didn't make them do anything, Mrs. Langford. They chose to. Victoria leaned forward, nails pressing into the polished wood. You must have done something. A trick, a song, a phrase. My daughters have been nonverbal since the day they were born. The best pediatric neurologists on 3 continents told me their brains cannot process language. So what did you do? Noah's voice stayed level. I talk to them every day. I read picture books. I sing the little tunes that come to me. I hold their hands when the physical therapist stretches their legs, and they're scared. Maybe, for the first time, they finally felt safe enough to try. Safe, Victoria repeated, the word tasting foreign on her tongue. She almost laughed, bitter and sharp. You think safety is all it takes? After everything I've paid for, every treatment, every machine, every specialist, you're telling me all they needed was to feel safe? Noah did not flinch. Sometimes, ma'am, he said gently, that's exactly all a child needs. Someone who refuses to give up on them. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft drum of rain. Victoria wanted to argue, to rage, to fire him on the spot for daring to suggest that money and medicine had failed where love had not. But the memory of Ava and Grace's shining eyes stopped her cold. She rose abruptly. "You were hired to maintain the property, Mr. Reed, not to play therapist. From now on you do nothing with my daughters without informing me first." Noah inclined his head. "Yes, ma'am." He turned to leave. Victoria's voice stopped him at the doorway. "Mr. Reed." He looked back. "Someone who refuses to give up on them," she repeated, almost to herself. The words tasted different the second time. He offered the smallest nod and disappeared down the hall. Victoria stood alone again, staring at the empty space he left behind. She walked to her office, the clock reading 9:17 a.m., though it felt like midnight in her bones. She opened the twins' medical files on her desktop, rereading the same merciless sentences she knew by heart. Severe quadriplegic cerebral palsy, nonverbal, minimal purposeful movement, poor prognosis for speech. She had accepted those words as life imprisonment. Yesterday they had cracked. That afternoon she summoned Nurse Amelia to wheel Ava and Grace into the sunlit playroom. She needed to see it with her own eyes, without Noah's presence. The girls sat strapped into their custom chairs, eyes drifting, beautiful and distant. Victoria knelt in front of them. "Hello, my darlings." "It's Mommy." "Nothing." She touched Grace's cheek. "Can you hear me, sweetheart?" Still nothing. The ache in Victoria's chest sharpened to a blade. Amelia spoke quietly. "They've been quiet all morning, ma'am. Mr. Reed usually spends the first hour with them, but he's been cleaning the east wing." Victoria's voice came out clipped. "Bring him here." Minutes later, Noah appeared, uniform sleeves damp, yellow gloves tucked in his pocket. He stepped in carefully, eyes lowered until he saw the girls. Then his whole face softened. Ava's tiny fingers twitched the instant she heard his footsteps. Grace's head turned, slow but deliberate. Noah knelt between their chairs. "Hey, my brave girls," he whispered, and began humming the same simple, wordless melody he always used. Grace made a soft sound in her throat, trying to match the tune. Ava's hand lifted a fraction, reaching. Victoria's breath caught. She whispered to Amelia, "Do you see that?" Amelia nodded, eyes shining. "They'd never do that with anyone else, ma'am." Noah glanced up at Victoria, calm as ever. They can respond. They just need time, not pressure. Victoria felt the floor tilt beneath her again. She wanted to speak, to demand, to command, but her throat closed. After an endless silence, she managed only one sentence. "You may stay with them the entire afternoon." "Yes, ma'am," he answered softly. Victoria walked to the doorway, then paused. She looked back once more. Noah sat on the rug between the twins, still humming. Ava's fingers moved in tiny circles to the rhythm. Grace's eyes were half closed in perfect peace. Victoria realized, with a pain that felt almost sweet, that her daughters did not need another doctor right now. They needed to be seen, truly seen. And Noah Reed was the first person who had ever looked at them that way. That night the rain stopped. Victoria sat in her darkened study, staring toward the soft glow of the nursery window across the courtyard. She whispered into the silence, "What are you doing that we all missed?" She did not have the answer yet, but she knew, with sudden fierce certainty, that she would soon. The next morning arrived wrapped in heavy gray. Damp wind swept through the tall cedars surrounding Mercer Island, carrying the scent of wet cedar and salt from a lake. Inside the estate, everything gleamed perfect, silent, but Victoria found no peace. She had spent the night replaying the playroom scene, the way Grace's fingers had stretched toward Noah, the faint smile on Ava's lips, the way both girls seemed to breathe easy the moment he entered the room. For 5 years their eyes had floated past her like clouds. Now they were waking, slowly, beautifully, cruelly, in the presence of a stranger. She needed answers. Victoria walked upstairs before the house fully stirred. She reached the nursery without touching the handle when a low, warm voice drifted to the crack in the door. She froze. Noah sat cross-legged on the wide silk rug, sunlight the color of weak tea washing over him. The twins lay propped against pillows in front of him, eyes wide and fixed on his face. He was rubbing lavender lotion into her thin arms with slow, reverent strokes, singing under his breath. And then Victoria heard the melody. Every note struck her like a physical blow. It was a lullaby Alexander had hummed every single night of her pregnancy, his lips pressed to her belly, promising the babies he would always be there. She had buried that song so deep she thought it was dead. Tears flooded her eyes before she could stop them. She pushed the door open, voice barely a thread. Where did you learn that song? Noah turned, startled but gentle. I didn't know you were there, ma'am. Victoria stepped inside, legs trembling. That song. Where did you learn it? Noah glanced at the girls, then reached for something beside him, an old, cracked leather notebook, edges soft from years of handling. He held it out to her. I found this wedged behind a built-in cabinet when I was cleaning the nursery shelves last week. I thought maybe the girls would like to hear their father's voice again. Victoria's fingers shook as she took it. The moment the cover opened, Alexander's handwriting leapt off the page, slanted, impatient, unmistakably his. Recipes for homemade baby food, notes on teething, a list titled Songs of My Daughters When I'm Away on Business. At the very bottom, in thicker ink, as though written in a hurry, for when I'm not here anymore, sing them this every night, so they know I never really left. Victoria's knees buckled. She sank to the rug, notebook clutched to her chest. Noah watched her with quiet sorrow. I didn't mean to intrude, Mrs. Langford. I just thought maybe they missed him too. Victoria looked at her daughters. Both girls were staring at Noah, tiny mouths working, fingers fluttering as if trying to reach the note still hanging in the air. She crawled closer and gently touched Ava's hand. For the first time in years, Ava did not remain passive. Her little head turned, slow and deliberate, toward Victoria. A faint, broken sound escaped, half breath, half syllable. Victoria went rigid. Was that? Noah's smile was soft, almost sacred. She's trying. They both are. They practiced the sounds when I read to them. Little puffs of air, shaping into words. Victoria's throat burned. She had waited half a decade for any voluntary sound at all. I don't understand, she whispered. Every specialist said there was no neural pathway for speech. No hope. Noah's voice stayed low, steady. Hope doesn't vanish, ma'am. Sometimes people just stop listening for it. There was no pride in his words, only truth so pure it hurt. That afternoon, Victoria could not bring herself to leave the nursery. After lunch, she returned and stood just outside the cracked door, listening. Noah was reading a cloth book about a lost baby bird. He read slowly, pausing after every sentence, waiting, giving the girls oceans of time. When he finished, he closed the book and whispered, "It's okay, sweethearts. You can try. I'll wait forever if I have to." Victoria leaned her forehead against the cool wall, arms wrapped around herself, tears slipping silently. When the story ended, Noah began the lullaby again. Alexander's melody filled the nursery like warm honey. Victoria's lips trembled. "Alexander," she breathed. "He's doing what I was too broken to do." She stayed there until the light shifted gold across the floor. That night, long after the house slept, Victoria sat alone in Alexander's old study. She opened the notebook again and read every page, tracing his handwriting with one finger as though she could pull him through the ink. Then she found the passage that stole her breath. "If anything ever happens to me, remind my girls that love can still reach them, even when words can't. Sing them our song. Hold them close. Tell them Daddy never stopped singing." Victoria closed the notebook, hands shaking. For years she had tried to heal with money, protocols, distance. Alexander had known the only medicine that ever mattered was presence. She looked toward the nursery window, glowing softly in the dark, and whispered into the silence, "Thank you, Noah." Even though he was miles away, asleep in a tiny apartment, she felt the words reach him somehow. The next morning the air felt different, lighter, as though the house itself had exhaled. Victoria stood at the kitchen island in silk robe and bare feet, coffee forgotten. She knew, with a certainty that frightened and thrilled her, that everything had already begun to change. And this was only the beginning. Victoria could not stop thinking about Noah Reed. Who was he, really? Why did he pour his soul into 2 children he had known for only weeks? And how could a man who pushed a mop every day understand exactly what her daughters needed when the highest-paid experts in the world had failed? On Thursday morning, she decided to find out. She called the private staffing agency that had placed him, her voice the cool, clipped tone that made CEOs flinch. I want the complete background file on Noah Reed. Every job, every reference, every reason he ever left the position. Send it within the hour. Yes, Mrs. Langford. Immediately. 53 minutes later, a thick encrypted PDF landed in her inbox. Victoria poured steaming Earl Grey into a porcelain cup she didn't taste and opened the file. Noah Reed, age 39. Born in Tacoma, Washington. Employment history. Head custodian, Seattle Children's Hospital. 5 years. Pediatric long-term care facility, Bellevue, 3 years. Maintenance supervisor, low-income senior apartments, Renton, 2 years. Family status. Divorced, 1 daughter, Lily Reed, age 5, full custody since 2023. References. Extremely reliable, goes above and beyond, children gravitate to him. Frequently stays after shift to read to patients. Then the line that made her teacup rattle against the saucer. Mr. Reed's daughter Lily was born with severe quadriplegic cerebral palsy, nonverbal, dependent on full-time medical care. Victoria opened the attached medical summary Noah had voluntarily disclosed to previous employers. The diagnosis was almost identical to Ava and Grace's. The prognosis was almost identical. The daily reality was almost identical. She set the cup down with shaking hands. Noah wasn't some mysterious miracle worker. He was a father who'd been fighting the exact same war she was fighting, only without private jets, without bottomless bank accounts, without an army of nurses. He understood because he lived it every single day with his own little girl. Guilt now crashed over her in waves. She had looked at him and seen a janitor. He had looked at her daughters and seen his own. That day was Noah's day off. He had mentioned in passing that he was taking Lily for her monthly neurology follow-up in Seattle. Victoria hadn't truly heard him then. Now the words burned. She glanced at the grandfather clock, 1:47 p.m. Before she could talk herself out of it, she grabbed her keys and drove the white GLS Maybach herself. No driver, no security detail. 25 minutes later, she was parked across the street from a tired 3-story brick apartment building in Rainier Beach. Peeling paint, rusted balconies, children's bikes chained to railings. Unit 2C. She told herself she would only look, only try to understand. She stayed in the car, tinted windows up, feeling like the worst kind of intruder. At 2:12 p.m., the glass door opened. Noah stepped out onto the second-floor balcony, pushing a small pink wheelchair. A little girl with chestnut curls sat bundled in a quilted jacket, oxygen tubing discreetly taped to her cheek. He locked the brakes, knelt so they were eye to eye, and pointed at something in the courtyard. A squirrel, maybe, or clouds shaped like animals. Lily's face broke into a crooked, luminous smile that transformed every plain feature into pure beauty. Noah kissed her forehead, then began to sing softly, the same wordless lullaby he used with Ava and Grace. Victoria watched Lily's mouth try to copy the shapes his lips made, tiny sounds escaping that never quite became words, but were trying so fiercely. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth to trap a sob. This was why he never rushed the twins. This was why he waited forever after every page of a book. This was why he believed hope never disappeared. He had been practicing that patience, that stubborn, quiet love, on his own daughter for 5 long years. Victoria cried in the Maybach like she hadn't cried since the night Alexander died. Great, ugly, healing tears that soaked the collar of her cashmere coat. Noah lifted Lily, carried her inside, and turned on the kitchen light. Victoria saw him set a pot on the stove, probably making the homemade formula the file said Lily still needed. A simple, exhausting, sacred life. At 3:29 p.m. her phone buzzed. A message from Nurse Amelia. Mrs. Langford, Grace just made a new sound. It sounded like she was trying to say, Ava, you should come home. Victoria looked up at apartment 2C one last time, wiped her face, and drove home faster than the speed limit allowed. She reached the nursery as dusk fell. Amelia met her, eyes bright. "Listen." Victoria dropped to her knees beside the crib. Amelia gently stroked Grace's hair. "Call your sister, Angel." Grace's gaze found Ava's across the dim room. Her lips trembled. A weak, airy sound floated out. "AAA, Virginia." Victoria's heart exploded. She gathered Grace against her chest, tears falling into the baby's curls. "You did it, my love. You're finding each other." She reached for Ava, held both girls as close as their fragile bodies allowed, and let herself cry the first tears of hope she had tasted in 5 years. That night she stayed in the nursery until dawn, sitting between the cribs, afraid to leave the miracle. When the morning nurse arrived at 6 a.m., Victoria was asleep on the rug, one hand on each daughter. She woke with stiff neck and a heart 10 times lighter. At 7:55 a.m., she heard the service door open. Noah was back. That afternoon, the sky over Mercer Island turned the color of old pewter. Black clouds swallowed the sun, and wind tore through the cedars like a warning. The Weather Service issued a rare, once-in-a-decade storm alert. Hurricane force gusts, possible outages, flooding on the floating bridge. Victoria stood at the tall windows of her office, watching the garden bend and thrash. She glanced at the clock, 4:41 p.m. Noah usually finished at 5. She found him in the laundry room folding tiny pink onesies that belonged to the twins. "Noah," she said softly. He turned, surprised to hear his first name from her lips. "A storm is coming. You should go home to Lily early. The roads will be dangerous." He looked out the small window, worry flickering across his face. "I was planning to leave at 4:30, ma'am, but the girls have been restless all day. They keep looking toward the door. I think they feel the pressure drop." Victoria understood. The twins were exquisitely sensitive to atmospheric shifts. "You've done enough," she said. "Go to your daughter. I'll stay with Ava and Grace tonight." Noah hesitated only a second, then nodded. "If anything changes, anything at all, please call me. I'll keep my phone on." "I will. Drive carefully." He left at 5:07, just as the first fat drops began to slap the glass. Victoria went upstairs. The nursery felt different, charged. Ava and Grace were awake in their cribs, eyes wide, tiny chests rising faster than usual. Nurse Amelia was already preparing emergency flashlights and battery lanterns. "I've got candles, extra oxygen tanks, and the generator tested." Amelia said, "We'll be fine." Victoria pulled a rocking chair between the cribs. "I'm here, my loves. Mommy isn't going anywhere." But the girls kept turning their heads toward the hallway, searching for the footsteps that always calmed them. By 7, the storm hit like Judgment Day. Wind screamed. Rain lashed the windows in violent sheets. Then the first thunderclap detonated overhead, so loud the entire mansion shook. The lights flickered once, twice, and died. Darkness swallowed the room. In that instant, Victoria heard a sound she had never heard from her daughters. Raw, terrified crying. Not whimpers, not fussing, but full-throated, panicked sobs that tore her heart in half. She leapt up, scooping Ava into her arms. "It's okay, baby, it's okay, Mommy's here." Amelia lifted Grace. Both girls kept screaming. Victoria rocked, bounced, whispered every soothing word she knew, and began Alexander's lullaby, but her voice cracked, thin and shaking. The thunder boomed again closer, and the crying grew wilder. Then above the chaos, a new sound cut through, small, desperate, unmistakable. "Noah!" Victoria froze. Grace's tear-streaked face turned toward the door, lips trembling. "Noah! Noah!" Ava joined in, voice ragged with terror. "Noah! Noah!" They were calling him. Not Mommy. "Noah!" Victoria's chest caved in, not with jealousy, but with a grief so pure it felt like grace. She laid Ava gently back in crib, hands shaking. "Amelia, stay with them. Keep them safe. I'll be right back." She ran downstairs in the dark, found her phone by flashlight, and dialed. 1 ring. 2. 3. "Hello." Noah's voice breathless, wind roaring behind him. Noah, it's Victoria. The girls, they're screaming your name. They're terrified. I can't calm them. I don't know what to do. Silence for one heartbeat. Then calm as sunrise. Put me on speaker and hold the phone close to them. Victoria raced back upstairs, set the phone between the cribs, hands trembling so hard she nearly dropped it. They can hear you now. Noah's voice came through the storm, warm, steady, familiar. Hey, my brave angels, it's Noah. I'm right here. The big noise can't hurt you. Mommy's holding you tight, and I'm singing to you, okay? The crying slowed to hiccups. Then he began the lullaby, Alexander's lullaby, the same one he had found in the notebook. The connection crackled with static, but the melody floated through like a lifeline. Ava's sobs turned to whimpers. Grace's tiny fist uncurled. Within 2 minutes, both girls were breathing deeply, eyes fluttering closed, asleep in the middle of the raging storm. Victoria sank to the rug, tears streaming down her face in the flashlight glow. When the song ended, she picked up the phone. Noah, thank you, she whispered, voice breaking. Where are you? Home, ma'am. Lily was scared, too, so she's sleeping in my bed tonight. We're safe. You're a good father, Noah. A soft pause. And you're a good mother, Mrs. Langford. You just have to believe it. The call ended. Victoria stayed on the nursery floor all night, holding one tiny hand in each of hers, singing every lullaby she could remember until her voice gave out. Around 1:30 a.m., the thunder finally rolled away. Rain softened to a whisper. Victoria looked at her sleeping daughters and spoke into the darkness. I'm sorry I was gone so long, but I'm here now. I promise. She curled up between the cribs, exhausted, and for the first time in 5 years fell asleep on the floor beside her children. Not because she had to, but because her heart refused to be anywhere else. Victoria woke at dawn to pale gold light, slipping through the nursery curtains. The power had returned sometime in the night. Her neck ached from the hardwood floor, but her heart felt strangely weightless, as though someone had lifted a decade of armor off her chest. Ava and Grace were still asleep, tiny mouths slightly open, faces peaceful in a way Victoria had never witnessed before the storm. She kissed each forehead, lingered a moment longer than necessary, then padded barefoot to the kitchen. At exactly 8:03 a.m., she heard the service door open. Noah stepped in, uniform still carrying faint streaks of yesterday's rain. He looked exhausted, yet the moment he saw her standing there in silk pajamas and bare feet, his eyes red from crying and lack of sleep, something in his expression softened. They stared at each other across the marble island for several long seconds, the air thick with everything unsaid. Are you all right? She asked, voice noticeably gentler than it had ever been with him. Yes, ma'am. Lily's fine. She smiled at breakfast. A small, tired smile tugged at his own mouth. How are the girls? They slept through the rest of the storm, Victoria said. Because of you. She stepped closer. Last night they spoke your name. Clearly, repeatedly. In terror, they called for you. She paused, swallowing hard. And in that moment, I understood something. My daughters love you, not because you're staff, because you are the one who shows up, every single day, without fail. Noah started to shake his head, but she kept going. I also realized something about myself. I've been running for 5 years. I hired the world to love my children for me because I was too afraid of losing again. But you showed me that love isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to stay anyway. Noah's eyes glistened. He looked down at his worn boots. Victoria took a steadying breath. I have a request, and you may say no. He lifted his gaze, wary. I want you and Lily to move in here. The West Wing has a private 3-bedroom suite, living room, full kitchen, accessible bathroom, everything you would need, rent-free. I'll increase your salary if you'll accept it. Noah's face went white. Victoria rushed on before he could refuse. Not to buy you, not charity, because Ava and Grace need the one person they trust completely. And Lily deserves the same nurses, the same equipment, the same safety we have here. I don't want your gratitude. I want fairness. You help me raise my daughters. I help you raise yours. Together, as family. The word family left her lips like a confession. Noah's eyes filled. He turned away, wiping roughly at his face with the sleeve of his uniform. For almost a full minute he couldn't speak. Finally his voice came out hoarse. "You don't have to do this, ma'am." "I know," she said quietly, "but I want to, because you deserve it. Lily deserves it. And my girls deserve someone who will never, ever give up on them." He turned back, eyes red but steady. "I need to think about it. For Lily, I can't make a decision this big without being sure it's right for her." Victoria nodded, throat tight. "Take all the time you need." He bowed his head, whispered, "Thank you," and disappeared upstairs to the nursery. Victoria stayed in the kitchen, heart hammering against her ribs. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended hush. Victoria did not bring it up again, but she noticed Noah's gaze lingering on the wide, sunlit hallway that led to the west wing. She noticed him pausing outside the nursery door longer than necessary, watching the twins with an expression she could no longer read as mere duty. On the 4th morning, he knocked softly on her office door. "Mrs. Langford, may I speak with you?" "Of course." She stood, motioned to the sofa. This time he sat. He placed his rough hands on his knees, stared at them for a long moment, then began. "I talked to Lily. I told her about Ava and Grace, about this big house with a garden and the swings that no one ever uses. I told her about your offer." Victoria waited, barely breathing. She asked me, "Daddy, are they like me?" I said, "Yes, sweetheart, exactly like you." Then she looked at me with those big eyes and said, "So, can I play with them?" Tears sprang instantly to Victoria's eyes. Noah's voice cracked. "She's 5 years old, ma'am, and she has never once had a friend who understands her. Not one." He took a shaky breath and met Victoria's gaze. "If you're still willing, we'll move in. But I have one condition." "Anything. I won't take extra pay. Current salary plus the apartment is more than generous. I don't want money to be the reason I'm here. I want to feel real. Like family." Victoria's vision blurred completely. She crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled him into an embrace. Not the stiff hug of employer and employee, but the fierce, trembling embrace of 2 parents who had walked through hell and found each other on the other side. "Welcome home, Noah," she whispered against his shoulder. He held her back, just for a moment, then stepped away, eyes shining, and nodded once. 1 week later, on a soft Mercer Island afternoon bathed in rare winter sun, Noah's weathered pickup rolled slowly up the long driveway. Victoria stood at the top of the stone steps, arms wrapped around herself against the chill and against the size of what was happening. Noah climbed out first, then walked to the passenger side and carefully lifted Lily's pink wheelchair. The little girl's eyes grew enormous as she took in the sprawling estate, the lake glittering behind it, swings waiting to be pushed for the very first time. Victoria descended the steps and knelt, so she was eye level with Lily. "Hello, sweet girl. I'm Victoria. Welcome home." Lily gave a shy, crooked smile and tried to lift her hand. Victoria took it gently. From a nursery window above, Ava and Grace watched, heads turned in perfect unison toward the sound of new voices. Noah looked up at the house, then at Victoria, and the gratitude in his eyes needed no words. They crossed the threshold together. For adults, 3 little girls, 1 shared heartbeat. For the first time in 5 years, the Langford estate was no longer a museum of grief. It had become a home. Dear listeners, sometimes love doesn't arrive in the shape we expect. Sometimes it walks in quietly, wearing a faded uniform, carrying a mop in one hand and a heart too large for any paycheck. Noah Reed is not a doctor. He is not a famous therapist. He is simply a father who refused to let go, and with that stubborn, tender love he gave 2 silent little girls their very first words. And Victoria, a woman who once believed money could solve everything, learned that love cannot be purchased. Healing does not always wear a white coat, and miracles are often disguised as the simplest acts of presence, patience, and care. This story reminds us that the people who seem the smallest, the most ordinary, are frequently the ones carrying the brightest light. Now I want to hear from you. Who touched your heart the most? Was it Noah, the quiet man whose love broke through years of silence, or Victoria, the mother who finally learned to listen with her whole soul? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Tell me the lesson you're taking with you today. If this journey moved you even a little, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs hope right now. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story. Because sometimes just one small, stubborn act of love can change an entire life forever.